How did you draw the stencil?
I always do my stencils by hand. So I print it out on a piece of paper, like normal computer paper, put a piece of stencil paper under it, and I trace over the photo. I just find it, I get more familiar with the image that way, instead of doing like a digital stencil or something like that.
And before we even decided to go live, you were sitting in the corner quietly just going over and over the stencil just to make sure that you really knew what you were doing. It's pretty cool to watch. So the other question is, what do you use to apply the stencil to the skin?
I use a bunch of different products. Usually I use Electrum. If it's like a tricky spot, I find the Electrum doesn't stick sometimes, so I'll use like Stencil Anchored or something like that, but majority of the time I use Electrum.
Tim, were you familiar with any of this type of technicality before you came?
I just wear the art. I'm not one to apply it.
You just sit there and let yourself be the canvas. The next question about the stencil too, are there any tricks in particular that you use to help you?
I always use like alcohol to dry the skin, because it'll take all the oil out, which means it'll kind of hold your stencil a lot better. And I suppose I could say don't overcomplicate it, but my stencil's always crazy. But
I mean, look at this right here. I don't know if you can see. This is what is actually going on Tim's arm. That's a pretty intense photo.
Yeah. I just say, like, don't overcomplicate it for yourself. Make your life easy.
There you go. That's a good way to live your life anyways. Make your life easy in everything that you do.
That's
no
right.
overcomplications, no overthinking, just do. Switching over to coloring, which is also very important, especially in your artwork. Colors pop, colors are bright. It helps make it look so real. What kind of ink are you using?
I always use Intense, man. I've used Intense since the day I started tattooing. And for me, it's the most natural healing out of all the inks, which is real important for me for realism, because a lot of the other ink companies, like the inks heal way too bright sometimes, or certain pigments anyway, and it makes the portraits kind of look like wax figures, almost like they're artificial, you know? Whereas Intense heals really natural, and I find it helps with the realism aspect of my work.
Do you think that maintenance is a little bit more involved with your pieces because there is so much color in there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're gonna get a good tattoo, you know, and you have to kind of invest time into looking after it and stuff like that. It's kind of sad when you see someone get a really cool piece and then not kind of, you know, like neglect it.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Tim? You
I
cannot.
heard it. I'm anxious to hear what he recommends.
Okay, on that note then, what does Tim need to do to make sure that his piece looks as perfect as it did today?
Okay, so for aftercare, I usually use Dermalize. It's a product, it's the same as like Second Skin or something like that. It's like a adhesive bandage, but it just makes sure that no bacteria can get in, no bacteria can get out. It heals perfectly fine, and it's like a carefree, like healing for dummies almost. You know? It's awesome.
I feel like there's a trend with Steve's like theories and how he handles things. You keep it simple. It's for dummies. We just keep it as simple as you possibly can. I love that.
There you go.
Is there anything in particular that you do with your ink before you start and even during the process?
Not really. I mean, like I'll always mix colors. If you're talking about something like that, I never mix like in the cap. I always dip in between, and I find that's easier for me because it kind of keeps me on my toes, being able to mix the colors all the time, and it kind of keeps you involved in what you're doing as well.
Actually, that goes right into a question that somebody else asked too, saying what's important to pay attention to when you are mixing your colors?
Pardon?
What's important to pay attention to when you are mixing your colors, bouncing back and forth?
So like for me, it's mostly like how the colors are made, because each color has like a certain base, and you need to understand like how the base is made, because if you mix it with a certain color, like if it's black based, it'll turn gray no matter what. Whereas if it's pigment based, then it'll change the colors. But if you keep dipping into the black base one, all your colors will just go gray, and then it mutes out the whole piece. So it's kind of good knowing how each color is made as well.
And this is the stuff that you learn just by working with the person that is teaching you and all of that kind of stuff, because to me, you're like, wait, what? Like, Tim, are you listening to all of this stuff?
I'm hearing it, but yeah, I'll forget it by the end of tonight.
No, but I have to ask you this, Tim. Now that you're getting like a full-on interactive conversation and understanding where Steve's coming from and putting that ink on your arm, does it make you appreciate what you're getting even more than you initially did?
Yeah. It's I can't explain how appreciative I am. I need to see the finished piece in order.
Yeah,
My bad.
Don't get your hopes up too early, bro.
Right.
That's right. Nobody can get excited. Oh, knock on wood. Don't put that out there. But that's hilarious. You got to wait and see what it looks like at the end. And then another question too about the color is how do you make it really pop?
To me, it's just contrast. Every piece really has to have a lot of contrast. So, I mean, it has to have a lot of black, like solid black and solid whites as well, and then everything else in the mid. If it doesn't have a lot of black, it's not going to hold up over time.
Is that basically the trick too, to make sure that these faces look as real as they look in the
Yeah,
picture?
for sure. Because like a lot of references that you use, like family photos and stuff, they're the worst photos in the world because they're just taken on a cell phone from over there in the corner. You know, they're not professional photos. So when there's like perfect shadows, good highlights, it makes my job a lot easier. It makes them a lot happier because the tattoo will look better.
They wanted to know what kind of voltage you use for lighter colors.
What kind of gold?
Yeah, voltage on your machine.
I use the same voltage for every color. I don't change my voltage at all. It stays, I use between 11 and 10.5 depending on the skin.
Okay.
If they got older, kind of tougher skin, I'll bump it up to 11. If it's like teenager skin, then it'll be like 5.
Okay. So the the voltage stays the same, but depending on the skin and how tough the skin is. Okay. What's important to pay attention to when you're mixing colors?
It's mainly just like how much you're mixing, I suppose. You got to keep looking at the needle to see what it's doing, because sometimes you'll dip into something and it won't mix at all. Sometimes it'll mix fully and go fully that color.
Okay.
So I suppose it's just patience.
Yeah, and is there a limit to how many colors you can mix?
No, not really, but sometimes it'll get a bit muddy and dirty if you mix too many.
Yeah, of course. You might start getting a brown, I guess,
Yeah,
when you mix
pretty
too
much.
many colors. And so do you have a favorite style of tattooing, portraits, or what would you say is your favorite?
Favorite would probably be portraits.
Portraits.
I like to be able to like relax and sit down and do just a portrait, you know?
Mm-hmm.
When it's got too much elements and people try to push it too far, it makes it stressful and confusing, you know?
Right.
It's nice to be able to relax and just spend all the time on creating the face really well.
And so I see on the bottom you did the roller coaster part, the tracks, I guess. So how do you get a smooth color transition in there?
Just kind of not using liners and sharper needle groupings. I use kind of big magnums, which allow me to not put any detail in and kind of blend a lot easier, I suppose.
Okay, so with the voltage, it stays the same per person. But do you use different needles depending on if you're shading or doing line work?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and so what are you using right now for this?
Right now I'm using a 7-round shader.
Okay.
It's like my go-to needle for all kinds of all my detail stuff, everything.